My name's Tim Haab. I'm the director of the Ohio State School of Environment and Natural Resources. I'll be your MC this morning. On behalf of the Environmental Professionals Network, now in its 12th year of programming, we're glad to have you here today. Also, a special welcome to everybody joining us online by the EPN YouTube live stream. Before we hear from our speakers, let's give a special thanks to the Ohio State University College of Social Work who sponsored our programs today. Thank you. We're also so grateful for the effort of Bailey Fullwiller, who played a major role in this morning's program development, including helping to identify our excellent panelists. For all the folks watching this program live on YouTube, please look for the link that Molly Bean posted in the chat. This link will take you to an online brochure, which is where you'll find information about each of our speakers, including their headshots and professional bios. For our in-person guests, you can take a photo of the QR code located on your table to get the same online brochure. We also have a few paper copies of the program that we encourage you to share at your tables. Students register at a reduced cost today, courtesy of various entities at Ohio State, including the School of Environment and Natural Resources, the Sustainability Institute, and the Facilities Operations and Development Department. We also thank the ODNR Division of Wildlife for their sponsorship of EPN. Our program sponsors are listed on the back page of the program brochure. Sponsorship support allows us to offer low-cost participation to students, who are the next generation of environmental professionals. Also, sponsorship allows us to connect with a wider audience by helping us to provide our live streaming format for the EPN Breakfast programs. For our friends on YouTube, please feel free to use the chat function to send in your comments, thoughts, and questions during the program. Our team will be reviewing these questions, and we'll take questions from the in-person audience around 9:10 this morning. Because we represent Ohio State's environmental school and outreach network, we're committed to offering EPN programs that limit our impact on the environment. Today's program is designated by the university as an official zero waste event, so please pay attention to the signage posted in the hallway and around the room, in particular on the side of the room, where you can compost any remaining food items on your plate, as well as sort out materials destined for the landfill or recycling throughout the day. We'll offer additional instructions at the end of our breakfast program for returning your scarlet-colored reusable plates, bowls, cups, and cutlery items. You'll notice that our reusable items are distinguished by their scarlet color. We color code our plates here. This color distinction improves our efforts to identify reusable items and help us host zero-waste breakfast events. Now let's start today's breakfast program. Today you'll hear from experts and practitioners from a wide range of Ohio State entities, including the Center for Integrative Health, OSU Extension, and the College of Social Work, in addition to a leading Ohio psychiatrist and author. Again, the bios for each of this morning's speakers and panelists are in the program brochure. After this morning's breakfast panel of speakers, we invite our in-person attendees to stick around for a series of professional development workshops, which will continue here in the ballroom. These professional development workshops will occur from 9:45 a.m. to 1:45 p.m., and lunch will be offered around noon. We have an excellent lineup of workshop leaders here today. I'll give you a brief overview of those right now. Our workshop series begins with Dr. Maryanna Klatt, who is the director of the Ohio State Center for Integrative Health. The topic of Dr. Klatt's workshop is mindfulness. She'll provide you a glimpse of her course and downloadable app called Mindfulness in Motion. Dr. Klatt's session will take place right here in the ballroom from 10 o'clock to 10:45 a.m. Dr. Klatt is also a panelist during this morning's breakfast session. Then starting at 11 a.m., Jesse Cassiano, who's the Senior Engagement Specialist focusing on environmental justice from the US EPA, will lead the next workshop session. Jesse's workshop will help you translate your technical skills into fundraising applications from federal and non-federal sources. You won't want to miss it. After Jesse's workshop session, that's hard to say, we'll break around the room around noon for you to enjoy your lunch, which was generously sponsored by the Ohio State University College of Social Work. After you finish your lunch, please stick around to participate in a yoga session led by SENR's very own Ellen Eilers. Ellen is the lab manager for the Environmental and Social Sustainability Lab here in SENR, and she is also the owner of Zen Yoga Studio in Clintonville. The yoga session will run from noon until 12:45. Finally, don't miss a networking workshop delivered by Kimberly Ordonez. Kimberly is a soon-to-graduate PhD candidate here in SENR and was recently hired as a forest social scientist for the Nature Conservancy. She's put together an excellent activity that will encourage you to network with your fellow workshop participants and make lasting connections that will contribute to sustainability. Kimberly's workshop on networking for climate resilience will run from 1 o'clock to 1:45 p.m. Now, please join me in welcoming to the podium Dr. Smitha Rao from the College of Social Work, who will be immediately followed by our panelists. Thank you.
Hear the ticking of the clock, see the sand move through the glass, the church bells chime, a canary dies, and a light starts fading fast. As a dark new day is dawning and things move closer to the brink, well, it's early in the morning, but it's later than you think. Yes, it's early in the morning, but so much later than we think.
I wanted to start with this song. It's early in the morning, but so much later than we think. Now, I heard this song as a 20-something environmental activist, environmental professional in the year 2008. That was 16 years back. And I remember being moved. I remember I was touched. I felt energized at the same time because we were working on the climate crisis in the year 2009. And this group that I'm really honored to be talking to and setting the stage for will understand when I say sometimes it feels like I'm talking to a wall. I've been talking to the same people, we're saying the same things, nobody's listening. I was intrigued when the EPN leadership, Joe, Harrison, Hallie, called me for this event. I am an academic today, but I continue to work on climate and environmental justice. I don't research climate anxiety, but it's something that I certainly recognize from years of being in this space. I've actively worked on it myself. I was telling my fellow panelists, when I was an environmental professional, we didn't have a term for this. We certainly recognized it. We talked about it. We talked about it among colleagues, among friends. We talked about burnout. I certainly had to take a step back from the work I was doing to reassess where I wanted to be. We talked about disappointment, but we also talked about finding common ground, on needing to pause, and then resuming, because that's what we've signed up for. All in all, I thought, let's try and talk about this. I was talking again to my friends and saying, I'm talking to a group of environmental professionals. A lot of my friends are still environmental professionals, whether in academia or outside. And they said, oh boy, it's going to be real right now, isn't it? I said, yes, I woke up doom scrolling on Hurricane Milton today. It is real. It is very, very palpable. Why do we need these mindfulness strategies to deal with all that the world is throwing at us? Strategies that we need to address this sense of unease that many of us have come to recognize only too well and learn to live with. We feel an existential dread, and it's the norm among this community of activists, organizers, and academics who are all working on environmental or climate justice. Some of the first things I do to process the endless barrage of climate news is to reach out to my friends and communities to commiserate hey, did you see this? Oh my God, can you believe that? That knowing that some people who get it is really a huge part of keeping us going. And the existential dread or anxiety is not just limited to just the climate crisis either, right? We are worried about the climate impacts directly, indirectly. I was hearing from friends yesterday, and they said, I'm tired and I'm sad. And it's a sadness that's just informed by so much that's happening outside the world. Processing the impacts of Helene, seeing the next hurricane barrel down as we speak. We've been tired of seeing warnings fall on unlistening, unwilling ears. We're tired of wars fought in our name and on our dime that make the climate crisis worse. We've known that, or negate all the efforts that we are taking to address it and the immense toll on life. We're tired of the converging crises. This group already knows, but our struggles are interconnected. This 2022 global analysis of risks faced by human rights defenders shows who's most at risks. Not surprisingly, it's environmental, land, indigenous peoples' rights defenders, defenders of freedom of expression, defenders of freedom of assembly, protest movements, women's rights, and labor, trade, and union associations. We are worried about democracy and the basic rights being trampled upon. The US elections are days away. The local and national elections are probably on every environmental professional's mind. The 2024 elections were meant to be the climate elections. And now, specifically on the climate crisis, for too long, I've been at it for a while in different avatars. I've seen many thought leaders, including in the climate movement, but certainly outside, suggest that we need messages of hope, that we focus too much on doom and gloom, that we need to know about the successes. But we know that some of it can be disingenuous and hurtful for communities that are hurting. And then there is some blatant gaslighting that comes with many of those stories of hope, and we do not need to change. And they tell a story that we don't need to change our ways. There are ways forward. And that is concerning because we've heard that for a while. I'm all for positive stories, right? I seek them out. I'm subscribed to one climate positive news a day. I think there are some links to that. But there's no need for coddling and not telling the full story. We cannot gloss over the inaction, the connections to the biggest oppressive systems, because that stalls action. And remember what the song said, it's later than we think. Climate change and climate justice specifically are such a strong framework to move towards an everything solution. All this to say, the need for strategies to address these challenges is immense. The need to take care of the eco-anxiety and climate anxiety that we're all feeling are real, because they collide with multiple other existential threats, because we recognize that the environment or the climate is almost never just an environment or climate issue. It's a housing issue, it's a food issue, it's a health issue, it's a reproductive justice issue, it's an immigrant and refugee rights issue, it's an anti-carceral issue, it's a community issue, and so much more. We need to build alliances, create solidarity, and have communities of care. I'm looking forward to learning from our panel of experts on how we take care of ourselves while we work on taking care of the planet. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to sort of follow that with, so all the stressors were beautifully laid out. And so I'm going to kind of talk about ways we can start to recalibrate, because when we get stuck into doom scrolling and looking, we have to look at those things, but we also need to pause and take care of ourselves, because otherwise we can't move forward wisely. So let's see. So, but first, before I do that, I'm going to just briefly discuss sort of the anatomy of our stress responses, right? So our bodies are beautifully designed to manage acute, tangible stressors. So, right, evolutionarily, you know, if we were out in the savannah and the proverbial saber-toothed tiger were coming our way, our nervous system will immediately trigger that fight-flight, that sympathetic nervous system. And we then can, but what happens then is our frontal lobe actually gets turned off. And when that happens, we lose the ability to sort of think wisely and plan and deliberate. And this makes sense, because if we're being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, it does not serve us to be weighing out our pros and cons. Should I fight? Should I run? Should I hide? What should I do? We just react. And so this is great for an acute problem, but so many of our problems now, as we just heard, they're chronic and they're less tangible, and we cannot run or fight them. We can act, but we can't run or fight. So our nervous system doesn't really know how to handle this. And so when we get stuck in these states, right, it can start to look like what we're seeing around the world right now, right? You get stuck in sort of that fight pattern. It can look like anger and hate and violence and polarization. And these are actually, I'm pointing this out because I think it gives a little compassion to kind of what's going on too, right? We're all reacting and we're all responding to each other. And as hard it is to watch and witness some of this, it's also, it is a coming from a place of fear, right? And the flight patterns, right? Denial, avoidance are our favorite one in our culture: busyness, addiction, anxiety, panic, even I would argue mania and suicidal ideation. These are all reactions, right? We're reacting. And when those patterns don't work, then, right, we can just collapse and freeze, and that can manifest as depression. And it's important to note that, right, although the more trauma one is faced and the more stressors there are in one's life, the more this gets amplified. And so the goal really is we then need to recenter so that we can turn our frontal lobes back on so we can make wise decisions moving forward rather than just reacting. And another big danger of when our nervous system gets dysregulated is it distorts our perception of ourself, others, and the world. So we start to see even neutral expressions as threatening, and especially if that, and neutral events as threatening. And that becomes even more magnified if that other looks different than us. And so we're seeing this for sure as well. And the response of all this is it starts to wear down our body and it starts to wear down our brains. But the good news is, right, there are lots of options. So our brain is incredibly neuroplastic. It's able to shift and react and create new networks with every thought and with every action. And it doesn't appear to be that way for most of us most of the time because we keep putting in the same input. We just keep telling the same stories and we keep having the same responses, and so it feels very set, but that's actually not the case. So the first step in starting to regulate is awareness, right? We cannot solve a problem if we're not aware of a problem. So we have to sort of do internal activism and become more aware of our thoughts and our body sensations and our behaviors and emotions and how these all feed each other. And so all I want you to really see on the slide is, right, all these things are being influencing and being influenced by each other. And what that means then is we can step in at any point to intervene. And I think a lot of the talks today will be about that. Right, so there's lots of ways to intervene, but what they all fundamentally come down to is awareness and reconnecting with our mind, our body, and our emotions. One of the most direct ways to intervene is with the breath. And so maybe even just pausing for a moment and noticing your own breath in this moment, right? Noticing if it's more in the chest or the belly. So when we breathe short, shallow breaths into the chest, right? And so anxiety, it's often short and quick, and depression, it tends to be slower but shallow. But what happens when we do this is it sends this message to the limbic system that basically there's this low-level threat, and then our brain is trying to figure out what that threat is, and our brain is really good at looking for negative things and finding it. It's biased that way. And so if we breathe, though, into the belly, if we can start to breathe slow, easy breaths into the belly, and we're going to be learning more about that, I think, today, when we do that, we send a direct message up to the limbic system that right here, right now, yes, there's lots of problems in the world and there's lots of things that need to be solved, but right here, right now, I'm safe, and we can turn off that fight, flight, and go into the rest and restoration, rest, digest, and heal part of the brain. The research on just focusing on the breath mindfully is pretty profound. It's been found that just 20 minutes daily, and it doesn't have to be 20 minutes all at once, but can be broken up over a period of 6 to 8 weeks, can change the structure and the function of the brain so that it's better connected and less reactive. And when that happens, right, then we can be present to do the actions and make wise choices, and keep going and not burn out. The other critical piece is just self-compassion. So, right, like I said before, when we're stuck in this sympathetic hyperreactivity, we distort not only how we see others, but ourselves as well. We tend to get stuck in self-blame and criticism and shame, right? And so just offering ourselves some compassion when we're stuck in these places. And it can be as simple as just rubbing your hand over your chest, kind of communicating with your body and your nervous system, like, okay, there's lots of stuff going on, but right here, right now, I'm just gonna take care of myself, just like we would a parent with a child, right? Just kind of tending to ourselves in that simple way. And there's lots of ways to do this, and there's formal meditations as well that have been shown to be very profound in shifting mood very quickly. And so obviously movement is super important. We're designed to move, right? So if that person got away from the saber-toothed tiger, right, they would have shaken out all of their stress hormones in their body, and it would have been released while they were moving. But most of us, we're running from things in our head, right? So the chronic stressors that we can't run from. We can't run from climate change. We can't run from the constant inundation of fear of the stories we're hearing all the time about all the disasters and all the things that are wrong in the world. We need to care, but we can't run or flee from them. So our bodies need to move, and the research shows that decades really of research show that physical activity can prevent or treat anxiety and depression really as well, and in the long term even better than medications. One study in Norway found that just 1 hour a week could improve mood and reduce risk of depression by 44%. So if you move and you get outside while you're moving, right now you have a double whammy, because now 15, right, that also helps improve our mood. We're part of nature, we're designed to be in nature, and when we're outside in nature, or even looking out a window at nature, right, our nervous systems go into that parasympathetic nervous system. And if you can't get outside, if you're stuck in an office, and just having it on your screen, a picture of nature, or listening to sounds of nature also activate parasympathetic nervous system, or even just having a plant by your computer. All of these things actually help to bring us back into that state. And then most importantly is just connection and collaboration. So, right, this is the most evolved way to manage stress. And actually by just being here today, right, you're activating this part of your nervous system. So kudos to all of you for showing up and taking care of yourself in this way, because it is very important. And it actually can override that fight, flight, freeze response. And then just, if you really are struggling, obviously, reaching out to a therapist or looking for groups, right? So group connections are so important. There are climate cafes that are available very frequently on virtually all over the country, which is just a good place to, listen and reflect and share in safe spaces, but just to kind of build those connections, and then just building connections within this room. And I am out of time, so I'm just gonna stop. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maryanna Klatt. I'm the director of the Ohio State Center for Integrative Health. And for the last 20 years, I think I've been fighting a similar fight as you all in this room, because to transform healthcare from disease care to health care with preventative things has really been my mission. And it is so frustrating, just like eco-anxiety, where you feel like you're knocking your head against a wall. And so I have stepped back, and the time has come. People get integrative health, they get the value of preventative care and how that can impact our whole being, body, mind, and spirit. And so I know we're not supposed to be too hopeful, but I have seen some change. And I believe that hopefully with all the things going on, that the climate change can somehow happen. So mindfulness is a valuable tool for your eco-anxiety toolbox. So I'm a mindfulness and yoga researcher. And what I do is explore ways to help people become aware of how we're living. How are we spending our time? What you think about is how you're spending your time. It's the currency of our life. What we do during the day is our value, how we experience life. It impacts the type of life we want to live and the type of change that we want to see in the world. Here is the most common question I get no matter what kind of talk I'm giving. What's the difference between mindfulness and meditation? Everybody thinks they know what mindfulness is. You hear it on every commercial now. It's a very simple concept. It is a quality of being in the here and now, but it is the hardest thing to do. The way that it's different from meditation is that meditation is a way to train yourself to be mindful during your days. Nobody would run a marathon without training for it. Meditation is a way to train your mind to pay attention. It's not about clearing your mind, emptying your mind. It's about quieting your mind so that you can see what comes up in your mind, so that you can notice, so that you can become more aware of what's really going on in your head. And it helps us reconnect with the actual physical here and now. So what's mindfulness? It is when you're walking, walk, when you're eating, eat. And yet that is so hard for all of us because we're so used to multitasking, which is our brains can't multitask. We task switch, but it happens at such microseconds that we don't notice it, and it is exhausting. So how does mindfulness make a difference in life? And this is something that was just said by our last speaker. It helps us to respond with awareness to life's happenings rather than to simply react out of a fight or flight response, which is a good thing. The fight or flight response is adaptive. It's good. It's not good when it's chronic, because then we can't make deliberate decisions, become aware, and get a solution-based resolution. So how does mindfulness work? So I'm a professor in the College of Medicine, and so people always want to know, what's the science behind it? It can change brain function and structure. The functional MRI has totally changed the research environment for mindfulness because something's wrong here on the computer. Wait a minute. Because people can be inside the magnet, the MRI, and meditate, and they can tell what your brain's doing. So brain activity persists even after somebody meditates, that's for sure. It increases myelination, so communication between the brain cells is quicker. And also, there's greater connectivity between the cells. So you know how like when you're creative, you feel like your whole brain is working? I think that's what that gets to. Mindfulness decreases our perceived stress. So decreases in perceived stress also correlate with reductions in the amygdala gray matter density. So the actual structure of our brain changes. So now they can tell this stuff. And these kind of studies make a difference for people coming online to get it. I think every friend and family sent me this article. This was a study on, they put mindfulness against Lexapro for depression and anxiety, or for anxiety. There was no difference. There was no significant difference between them. It wasn't that one was better than the other, but there was no significant difference. So that showed something. So up until 2011, I spent my time doing stress reduction programming for all different kinds of environment. I love these studies. One was with trash collectors, City of Columbus, loved it. Police department, inner city kids. I loved all of this stuff. But I'm in the College of Medicine, and I wanted doctors and nurses to understand and to tell their patients, hey, there's other ways to stay healthy. So I switched my emphasis and focused on healthcare providers. Whether it be healthcare providers or any of those other things, there was some commonalities across all different kinds of professions and groups about what caused stress. What do you think the number one thing was? Just yell it out. Time. Everybody thinks these things, yeah. It isn't. It's other people. Across everything. And other people, because we can't control what others do. Too much to do in too little time. Lack of control, not enough communication, not feeling seen. That is so stressful. So, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a mindfulness teacher. I put those two things together, added music. So I've got an 8-week program, an hour a week for 8 weeks. It has personal reflection, scientific evidence, gentle music in the background, and community sharing. So I took this to the hospital. Here's the outline of the 8 weeks. Why practice daily is the first week. How to sleep mindfully. Everybody loves a good night of sleep. And then different topics through the 8 weeks. So I put this together in 2004. And I got a small little Women in Science grant to put it together. They gave me, I was working for OSU Managed Healthcare, and I tried to pitch this to them. Hey, can I try this, this new program I've put together? And they're like, yeah, we're gonna give you 6 male-dominated departments at OSU. And let's see if you can make a difference for those guys, okay? I did. I loved it. They loved it. I showed the data, and I was off and running. So for the next few years, I did a whole bunch of studies. Every single, 3 of them were NIH funded. Every single one had significant improvements in burnout, perceived stress, resilience, and work engagement. But there was one study that made a difference. I did it in the surgical intensive care unit with 32 nurses. We met on the unit. The hospital paid for floating nurses to come so that they could be part of this program. We got a 40% reduction in salivary alpha amylase, which is like in your spit, and it's a marker of sympathetic nervous system activation. The stress in the surgical intensive care unit was never going to change. What changed was their response to the stress. So they recognized that their own stress response was their own responsibility and that they could do something about it. But they felt great because the hospital paid for them to do this. They paid for the nurses to substitute, to be their subs. So the hospital steps in once they saw those results. Research makes a difference. And they pay for any faculty or staff that works at OSU Wexner Medical Center to do this program now. So that started in 2017. We've trained about 36 facilitators to help delivering it. I wondered, well, okay, I get these great results at 8 weeks. How long did they last? They last 14 months, still at a significant level beyond the 8 weeks. COVID hits, never wanted to go virtual because I'm a personal person, but I had to go virtual like we all did. So I did not think community could be created on a computer screen. I was wrong, and some of the results were better virtually. So I learned I could do this. Virtual delivery was effective. Ended up getting a couple $1 million from the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Comp, which allowed me to create an app so that we could scale and disseminate the program. So we've taken it to firefighters across Ohio and other health systems. The app has really been a game changer. It used to be on a website, people would have to bring up the daily practice. Now you get a 2-minute meditation every day. Here are the results. I just want to show you this on the healthcare workers. On the first 695, we get a 28% reduction in burnout from week 1 to week 8. So that's a lot. Perceived stress significantly down, but it's these two bottom ones that are way more important to me. Resilience goes significantly up, and work engagement goes significantly up. So you can imagine the hospital likes the work engagement one. But that is the difference of 195 people from week 1 to week 8 that are no longer qualify as burned out. So mindfulness for climate change, how might that help? Well, come for the 10 o'clock and then you can see for yourself. Thank you.
Hello, thank you all so much for coming. I appreciate the invitation and I appreciate working with a difficult audience because when we talk about a male-dominated field, there is nothing more male-dominated than the agriculture industry and farming. And it has taken me a long time to break down the barrier working in this field, but I can tell you that now being in this role for about 3.5 years, that now they say, oh, you again, but they come back every time to my programming. So it's been a wonderful time working in this field that I have been in. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the programming efforts that we do at Extension. I don't so much do research as much as I do programming for OSU Extension, and we're actually in the 4-H Center, so I'd be remiss if I didn't say that part of the programming is 4-H, but we do so much more, and part of that is suicide prevention education. And so I am working to break down the stigma with our agriculture communities to try to tell them that it's okay to not be okay, right? And right now, I did not pick this picture in coincidence with the drought that we currently have in Ohio. And yes, there is a lot going on down in the South, but it would be very remiss to say that there's a lot going on right here in Ohio when it comes to rural farming communities. And if you're not aware, you can doom scroll what's happening right here in Ohio when it comes to the drought. Many of our farmers are struggling with drought conditions. And yes, we've had recent rains, but that is not enough to make up for the drought that we currently are experiencing. So when you look at what is farm stress, right, maybe some of you have heard of what is farm stress. You've heard of farm stress as kind of a buzzword. But when we look at farm stress, it's really classified as a combination of stressors that farmers who work closely or who are farmers or who work closely in the farming and agriculture industry experience due to their occupation, right? So some of them may be farmers, but some of them may be people that make cheese in a result of people that take milk from the dairy farmers, right? And so that was something I didn't even think about until recently. And so when we look at the drought conditions, they affect not only people that make and grow row crop farmers, but it also affects those who are dairy farmers and those that have cattle, right? And actually by me over in Eastern Ohio, they're opening up lakes and streams and rivers for them to get water for their livestock production because there's not enough water for them, which is just unheard of in the 12 plus years that I've worked and lived in Eastern Ohio. We've never had this happen. This is a once in 100-year situation that we have going on in the state of Ohio. And this really is gonna have lasting impacts as we go through the winter months and in the next spring. We would have to have over 20 plus inches of rain in the next 6 to 12 months to make up for the rain that we do not have right now. And so it's easy, and that's from our climatologist, Erin Wilson. I'm not a climatologist, so take notes on that I am not the expert in that, but Erin Wilson is a wonderful source and extension to reach out for more information if you're interested in that. But that comes straight from the source there. But our agriculture community is struggling when it comes to climate change and when it comes to the stressors that they experience on a daily basis, whether they realize it or not. And so part of my goal is to help educate them and spread the message that it's okay to not be okay, and to help them realize the warning signs and symptoms of what they can do, how they can help alleviate the stress that some of my partners and panelists have shared, what they can do, and how I can support those that work closely with them. And so one of the things that we did was we created this alliance with other state agencies and localized agencies around the state of Ohio. And one of the very first things we did was we created a survey for our agriculture community to take around the state of Ohio and just ask them, right, anonymously, what are some things that you're experiencing? What are some things that are stressing you out? Do you feel like you know where the resources are? And would you feel comfortable accessing those resources or talking to somebody about, I need help, I need support? And so these are some of the agencies. If you're not familiar with Farm Credit, it is more of a localized in different areas. And since this has been created, we've had other partner agencies come alongside of us, which has been wonderful. This was just kind of the core group of people that initially came together. And you can see some of our results out there at our booth and table. And weather at the initial time of the survey was not a high one, but I could venture to say that it probably would be right now if we surveyed them. Okay. And so one of the things that we do in Extension and one of the programs that we created is called Farm Stress Certified. And we did this because we found a need through our farmers. They were saying, we want to learn how to cope with these stressors. We want to talk to somebody. We're interested in how do we deal with these stressors, right? Whether it be climate change, whether it be, business finance, but there is nobody to talk to. We don't have anybody to talk to. Nobody understands what we're going through. And they don't know mindfulness. They don't know how to cope with things the way that maybe some of us feel more comfortable learning about. and they don't have friends and peers that they feel comfortable talking to. I was hearing that on a regular basis. And so we came up with this program called Farm Stress Certified, where we're teaching mental health professionals or anybody that feels interested in learning about the unique stressors that the agriculture community has, to get them trained at like a 30,000 foot overview, right? Because there's so much uniqueness to the farming community that even I am still wrapping my head around. And every farmer is unique, just like we are all unique. And so we have an upcoming training. If you're interested in that 30,000 foot view of the agriculture community, you can sign up at this website. And then we have this QR code that you can also scan if you're interested. I'm one of the speakers, as well as we have great panel of real farmers that share their experiences, their stressors, and then we have other experts that talk more in depth about certain topics of their expertise. And that's all that I have. So thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to the rest of the day.
Thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing their work and insights. Let's take a moment to take a deep belly breath before we jump into some questions. All right. I have many questions. We'll see how much we get through. I guess for folks in this room, right, I'd love to hear your takeaways on how mindfulness practices can help us manage climate anxiety while remaining proactive in our work. Yeah, anyone can go.
I mean, can you hear me? Yeah. I mean, so like I talked about earlier, right? So mindfulness it shifts us into a place where we can respond rather than react. So not only are we helping ourselves by calming our own nervous system, but we're able to then be able to make wiser choices and not get burned out in the process, right? So we're going to be able to sustain the long term.
When we're burned out, we shut down, and so when we shut down, we can't do any of the activism activities.
Yeah, I would just echo what both of you have said.
Thank you. Maryanna, I have a question for you. Is the Mindfulness in Motion app free?
Yes, it is, and I have a handout on it. Yes, yes, and that's why I was so excited to get that grant from the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Comp, because they wanted, part of the stipulation was if we developed the app, it had to be freely available. So there's a free version and then there's a paid version, but the free version is good.
Okay, thank you. I'm thinking about all of your remarks, and Jodie, you definitely talked about connection, community, and I touched upon it. Like, I reach out to my support network the first thing every time climate anxiety or eco-anxiety or any anxiety hits. So I want to talk about the role that community plays in addressing eco-anxiety and how mindfulness practices can foster a sense of community. I'm also thinking of my student Fiona's work. Fiona is here, I think. She was outside tabling on her social connection and climate extreme weather adaptive capacity connection that she's studying in southern Appalachia. So the sense of community I just want to hear a little bit more about what you're seeing in your practice. And you certainly touched upon it, Bridget, in the farming piece. It's
So-
for all of you. Yeah.
So the community part, I think, is so important because to not feel alone is huge. I mean, we all know how it feels to feel isolated and alone. And so to just have a sense of community, that we're not in this by ourselves, but other people are concerned about the same things, it just makes a difference.
And I would just add, right, it helps with just co-regulation too. It helps our own nervous systems, right? Because we all feed each other. Like our nervous systems are responding right now to each other. And so, right, if we can do it in community, then we're all it has even more powerful effect than I think individually.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to shout out also to Fiona's work. I've really enjoyed working with her in the past. But I think that I say Appalachia because that's where I'm from. But, so I feel like I get to choose what I want to call it. But, I think that that's the struggle, right, down there and in the rural communities is they don't feel like that sense of community. They don't feel like they can talk about their struggles when it comes to eco-anxiety or any kind of anxiety. And when they do find somebody that they can talk to and commiserate with, that's all that they have. And so one of the biggest things that I have tried and the rest of our team has tried to do is commiserate with them and also find those advocates that are willing to share their stories, because it's easy for me to go down in and say, this is important, we care about you, I care about you. My husband works in the trenches in the agriculture community, but we don't have a farm. And so we can only show so much and share so much with them. But when it's peer-to-peer support, that's what's really going to bring that in. And when somebody says, I see a counselor, I see a therapist, or, this is what I do mindfulness, or I've downloaded this app, or, I've gone to mental health first aid, then somebody else will be more likely to do that, right? We know that studies show that if somebody close to you refers somebody else to therapy, you're more likely to do that, contrary to what the general community thinks or knows. And so I think that it's really important.
Thank you. I'm thinking about folks in this room again. What are some practical steps that organizations can take to incorporate strategies of mindfulness into their environmental programs? Do you have suggestions for organizations?
Okay, so, one of the things that you talked about to me personally was that OSU Extension has reached out to you, right, about mindfulness. We do offer some mindfulness programs to the general population, right? So we're in all 88 counties, and we have some more heavy programming in the opportunity to have mindfulness in some other counties than others, which is wonderful, and hopefully we'll just continue to do that. And so we offer mindfulness programming, can do that in counties. But I think also when we talk about, whether it be mindfulness, whether it be, promoting, 988 hotlines or other things like that, where you have somebody to talk to and just that peer-to-peer, whatever that might look like. I think it's just letting people know that we care about you, we're here for you. I found it very fascinating that your study showed that people don't feel valued or supported by your agency. I think that's really important, right? An agency showing, hey, I'll just use me as an example. Hey, Bridget, I value the work that you do, right? What you do is important. Using your name in whatever sentence instead of sending out a generic greeting card, right? Those things matter to us, and I think showing that is what is most important. But having those things in offices to just say, here's this information, instead of sending out a mass email of, here's the EAP helpline, right? And here's where you would go for mindfulness techniques, I think are really important steps that an agency can take. Yeah.
So we had a 2-year contract with the city of Columbus so that people, city employees could talk with one another about their stresses, and it was great. We just started a 2-year contract with the Central Ohio Trauma System, the people that are in charge of emergency preparedness for Ohio. I had no idea the stress that they are under on a daily basis. No idea. And they started the 8-week program. They're on week 4. And it's so cool to hear the conversation between them. They're from all the different counties. And you hear about somebody else's stress and how they're addressing it. It gives you ideas on how to deal with your own stress. And I think that's the power of community.
Jodie, you can hold on to that mic. I have a question for you. Are there, in your experience, are there more people talking today about climate or eco-anxiety, and what do you tell them when they come to see you?
So, I'm seeing more, but usually it's not, no one comes to me, well, I won't say that. Some people come to me and that's specifically what they're concerned about, but more often than not, it's sort of just underneath it all, right? And I think that's true for all of us, right? It's almost become like this label but it defines so much anxiety about so many different issues, right? And so as we start talking, then it becomes clear that that's a piece of it. And certainly I see a lot of moms that are concerned about having kids now, and issues like that are becoming more prevalent. And really, again, it comes back to it is what it is, right? So we have to kind of ground ourselves, and then, okay, so what can you do? But I think action is so important, right? Action and community, and having someone to talk to. And then having our own practice of self-care.
Grounding yourself is action. I became so anxious preparing for this talk because I didn't know what eco-anxiety was. I'd never even heard of that term before, okay? And then I started to look at the research. My anxiety level went up and up. But it was a good exercise because that anxiety, you're right, it applies to so many things. And the same practices apply across.
I want to talk about if there are any common misconceptions about mindfulness that you might want to address.
I mean, I think the most common is, right, you're sitting and it's always peaceful and there's no thoughts in your head, and that doesn't exist. No. I've been meditating every day for 30 years, and when I sit down, I still blah, 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 blah. It's all over the place. But then by the end, I'm more grounded and I'm calmer and there's less chatter, and then there's just more space between the chatter. But I think that's the biggest thing, because all my patients come to me and they're like, I can't do it. And I'm like, no, you are doing it, right? And the more you do it, it does build that muscle. And so it's easier when you get, even we all react, but it's easier to come back much quicker. But that never happens that you're not going to react or feel bad. And I think really actually the most important thing, and I think you said this, you said this, it's okay to not be okay, right? I think that's the key thing. We can feel anxiety and we can still be okay. We can feel sad and we can still be okay. And I think that's what it teaches.
I would say what I experience and see when I talk to the agriculture industry is they tie it a lot to a religious experience. If I'm going to practice mindfulness, that it's tied to some religious experience that I don't practice. And of course, we know that's absolutely not true, or doesn't have to be the case. For some people do, right? And that's wonderful for them. But it doesn't have to be the case. And so just trying to make them aware of what other types of mindfulness is out there, I think is really important. And like you said, the blah, 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 right? I experienced that as well. I've not been practicing for 30 years, so I commend you for that. And then also the misconception I have experienced, and maybe just because I work in a predominantly male population, is that it's a female-driven, right? All women do mindfulness and practice mindfulness, and if I'm a man, this is not for me, right? And so just trying to let them know, like, it's okay, right? Like, you could do this too, right? And so those are the two things that I experience a lot when I do this, when I teach my programming.
Maryanna, any misconceptions that you come across?
The religiosity thing, that it's a Buddhist practice. That used to be a lot more, though. And today, I think mindfulness is more accepted as a secular practice, so that's been good. Like, I'm a very spiritual person, and I think that mindfulness, no matter what your religion or spirituality is, can deepen that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a non-religious meditator. Well, I practice off and on. I fall out of practice, and we call it the monkey mind, the blah, blah, blah of the mind. You just have to come back, recognize that's what minds do. They jump from branches to branches. Well, what future research or initiatives would you like to see at the intersection of mindfulness and environmental or climate-related mental health? And it probably would be mindfulness and mental health overall, but applied to environmental and climate issues.
I'd like to see a group of environmentalists do it together and see what the results would be.
We were talking about this earlier, actually. I'd like to see more resiliency networks, right, to prepare for the inevitable disasters that are going to be happening, but to have them in place ahead of time. And your app is certainly a good place to start for that, but more sort of in person as well, different groups of people.
Programming.
Yeah. And to have that just be part of everyday, everywhere.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, a group of people, but also making sure that we have a well-represented group of people, right? Because I do feel like the group that I work with, the population I work with is often left underserved, right? And is often left out of the conversation, which is why I work really hard to represent them. I know that they seem like a population that, would not need the representation they do, and I would be happy to talk with you because I know we don't have much time, but they are an underserved population. And so just making sure that they're a part of the conversation as well, because there are people out there that do want to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, building community and asking ourselves who's not at the table, who's not here, who should be here, for sure. I want to ask a final question, and you can take a minute to think about it. But what is your personal or go-to mindful practice or routine that you use to manage eco-anxiety or other forms of anxiety? And can you share a specific technique or habit that's been particularly effective for you?
So for me, I've had a long practice, and it's always changing and evolving. So it used to be just meditating, sitting, meditating, and then I did yoga teacher training, so then I was doing yoga and then would meditate at the end. And now I did Qigong teacher training, and now I love that. And so I mix it up because I get bored easily. So I just check in with myself. Like sometimes I need to move more, and sometimes I'm just need to move less and slow down more. So I kind of vary between those things. But the most important thing is I do it every day, because if I don't, then it's not even effort, because I just know that my day is going to be better. My days kind of suck when I don't. Like, I just can feel the difference, and it's just the day's harder. Everything's harder when I don't do it. So, yeah, that's mine.
So just this morning, there was an article in the New York Times about decreasing anxiety. It's when you first wake up to not doom scroll.
Okay.
If you don't look at your phone until after you ground yourself, it was a great article. And I thought,
I need to look at it, yeah.
how apropos for today. And it's connecting with the real first before the virtual. And what do we have that's more real than our own bodies?
Yeah, I listen to calming music on Spotify. That is definitely one of the things that really helps ground me, because I'm not so good at the quiet meditation. So just listening to, like, I'll pick like ocean waves or kind of whatever, you need to do. I'm not good at every day. So those people out there, it's okay. I'm with you. I want to be an everyday person, but I'm not, unfortunately. So just listening to that, especially when I feel myself really building that anxiety, the calming music, and then I try at least a few times a week to make sure that I am not on my phone at night, because we're all, everybody wants to be on their phone at night. And so being more intentional about, that I'm not on my phone right before bed helps me. I very much notice a difference when I'm not on my phone right before bed, because I go to sleep quicker, and I just have a better night's sleep. And so those types of things are things that I do. But now after this, I'm just going to become a really good meditator and mindful. So we got this, you guys.
The one other thing, super easy to do, because some people say that's hard to sit, but I think it's really hard to go from really frenetic energy to just sitting and meditating. But one simple thing to do that doesn't take any training is just to shake. Just to shake your body, right? And literally you're releasing all those stress hormones, and it just drops you down really fast, and it can just be for a few seconds.
Thank you. We will now move on to the audience questions, and Joe has the mic.
Fantastic. Look at all these questions. And I do want to acknowledge that we have some folks with us on YouTube, and they've expressed their support and gratitude for this panel, and we'll be checking for questions for those of you online. But let me just run it to the first hand I see.
Thank you for sharing all this information with us. But I know I have come across research that for individuals with post-traumatic stress and a history of trauma, seated mindfulness meditation can be harmful. And I'm wondering if there are other strategies you would recommend that would be less risky for those individuals for relieving stress and becoming more present.
So most of my patients have significant trauma, and the shaking actually is a really good place to start, because it just, I'll just get up with them and we just shake together, and it just helps release some of that, and then they actually can sit for a short period of time. But you got to release all the stress, and then and do it in small sort of micro dosing, right? So you can get used to realizing, oh, this is okay, this isn't as scary as I thought.
So my program's called Mindfulness in Motion, and that name is very important because I must be ADHD, because I have to move before I can settle. And so the idea is, how do you get mindfulness into the motion of your day? And that's why I have yoga as part of it, because there's always movement at the beginning, because I don't know how others quiet their mind without doing some movement first.
Hello, my name is Nicole. Thank you so much for being a part of this program and panel. I have a question, I guess, in regards to, well, I have like 5 questions, but I'm trying to figure out which is the best one that I can ask. But I guess the one that I'm being drawn to more connects to marginalized communities and thinking about mindfulness, meditation, and even climate anxiety. I guess, so I'm an environmental educator and a birder, and I grew up in inner city Cleveland. I think about the environment itself. I grew up with 10 siblings, so a house full of siblings, but thinking about my connection to nature, because it was in response to going through trauma as a young child. But for me, I would often go, what available green space we had wasn't very much to, I guess, disconnect from the hustle and bustle of life and the trauma. But thinking about others that need more of that, like as assistance, I feel like we're in such a world that's focused on individuals, and like we're responsible for our lives and like taking action and being motivated, but at the same time, we still need support. So at the core of that, what do you, I guess, suggest for communities, and this is more community focused than individual, what advice or what ways can communities connect outside of their everyday, and like if they have like big families and they want to do more of the mindfulness and meditation, but they can't do that in their home and want to be able to use resources in their communities, but you have to think about things like, mobility, like do you have sidewalks, do you have parks, do you have clean air? Like those, I think, all kind of come together when we have that experience, that climate anxiety, but what is actually being done about it to like make sure that it's a more holistic view, I guess, of those practices, instead of feeling like it's just up to me. And I feel like that disconnects us even more. So I don't know if you have any thoughts or advice for that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. This is another area that I feel like extension can really play a really big role, especially being in a big, I don't know if you're still in Cuyahoga County. You're here, okay. But Cuyahoga County would be an area, Franklin County. I know I have coworkers in Licking County and Warren County who do a lot of programming when it comes to mindfulness and nature. And they do a lot of like walking programs and being just grounded in nature as their sort of mindfulness programming. And a lot of their programming is free. And so they just set up programmings, dates, times, and they make it, like you said, handicap, I know you didn't use the word handicap accessible, but accessible in terms of like going to nature preserves that are intentionally have the accessibility for anybody, right, to attend. And a lot of those can be free because they're just at nature parks or wherever, conservancy areas. And so I think those are really areas to take in mind. Your local county extension offices, again, some have more accessibility than others, but especially our bigger counties like Cuyahoga, Franklin, Warren, up in Toledo, is that Lucas County, I think. Those are going to have more ability to have bigger programmings, and we're just seeing this movement, like we're doing here today, and talking about this mindfulness and talking about this being grounded in nature and being grounded in the outdoors. We're seeing more of this programming throughout extension, and I think it's only just going to continue the movement. And so just checking into your local county extension. We do have a website that lists all of them, but you could also just type into a web browser, Franklin County Extension, and you'll get all the information, OSU Extension, and you'll get the information for that. So whatever county you're in, just type that in, and then you'll be able to contact your local extension office, and they'll be able to tell you what kind of programming they offer. Many of them would be either the family consumer science area or also the agriculture and natural resources area. So I encourage you to do that.
Can I just offer a little remark? Thank you for that question. And that's something that we definitely need to be thinking about, because what does, for example, ecotherapy mean for urban communities that don't have access to nature the way many other communities do? So thinking about, climate or environment being an everything issue and connecting it to those questions that matter the most to communities. I've seen urban forests and, farming practices bring communities together, addressing multiple aspects of the stressors that communities are dealing with. So that's just one way I have seen people come together working on common ground in their neighborhood, growing food and having those conversations to get started on that journey.
Hello, everyone. My name is Miss Mickey Smith, and I'm the Executive Director for Taking Back Our Youth. And when you talk about the marginalized communities and you talk about having the individuals in the room, and we don't have them, I come from Cleveland, Ohio, in an urban community where the crime is very high. How do myself as an educator, a nonprofit executive director, take this information back to the communities and educate them? Because I am an educator also, how do we get trained with your MIM technical or your training or your certification? And I can take this back to Cleveland and be that expert in the room to be able to provide the necessary education to them. It is our responsibility to be able to educate our people in our communities because that's where we live at. So I just want to know, how do I become one of your trainers in order to get that to my community, and we build upon that. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got a very structured training program for facilitators, so we will connect with you to get you. But I wanted to say something. So, and I agree with this for marginalized communities. So I have a colleague in the College of Nursing, and we have, actually it's an NIH study on African American caregivers of Alzheimer's patients. And it's for caregivers that have hypertension. And it's a combination of mindfulness in motion, my program, and the DASH diet. And it's like the DASH diet, you know, the low salt for cardiovascular stuff. How does the African American community adapt that diet and adapt mindfulness specifically for that marginalized community? It has been so cool. And you do need people that look like the community that they're teaching to deliver the program. And so we have, that's what we've focused on for training those facilitators. So you're exactly right.
I think also, I don't know if you know your local extension in Cuyahoga County, was Central State, but also OSU Extension, yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay, great. I just want to make sure you know that both of those. Okay, great.
Okay, we have time for one final question.
So Jeff Sharp, I'm a faculty here at Ohio State. Just one first comment is for Dr. Klatt. I worked with Emily Vore. She lined up somebody to come in to give a sound bath to a student group I'm teaching at noon today, independent of this, and I was just delighted. I just wanted to comment. I think one thing I always find about this, I've been practicing sort of these things for 14, 15 years. It always seems like an add-on that, like, as an afterthought, we think, oh, well, we need to be thinking about mindfulness in terms of teaching folks. And you know, one thing I've discovered recently is there's an idea of sustainability competencies that we need to be teaching our students. And I think one of the empowering things there for those of us that in the education field is one of the competencies is intrapersonal competency, teaching folks how to self-care. And I think as we design curriculum, I'm increasingly of the opinion we need to integrate this into the curriculum. And so I mention this partly because I've added these modules into some of my classes in the last couple years. I'm curious, within the med field, it seems like they should be integrating this into their formal curriculum, but what are the opportunities to integrate this into not just simply we anecdotally have a conference, but we actually integrate this into our formal teaching. So when I teach Intro to Sustainability, I spend a week talking about self-care, you know, personal, avoiding burnout, those kind of things. I'm just curious what the opportunities are for that, because it seems like we got to go beyond just having these side conversations, and this needs to be integrated holistically into our educational activities.
I couldn't agree with you more. At the 10 o'clock workshop, I'll give an example. There's a design for sustainability course. I think it's in the College of Architecture, or maybe design, I don't know. Anyway, the professor was going to come to today She couldn't come, but she sent me the comments from her students because she does a 5-minute mindfulness thing at the beginning of every class, and the students have commented on how that has changed the course for them. So I think integrating it into lessons is the critical thing. So we've got a course, a freshman seminar for freshmen here at Ohio State called The Mindful College Student, where it's the 8-week mindfulness in motion course. So, but it doesn't need to be a separate course. It needs to be integrated in little nuggets. I agree.
And we're out of time. Thank you so much to the panelists, and thank you to all of you for the engaging questions.
Please join me in thanking Jodie, Maryanna, Bridget, and Smitha. As we always do here at EPN programs, we want to recognize each of you with a certificate of appreciation. These certificates are to acknowledge your work to help us learn and shape the world for the better. Looking around, it's easy to gather that there are many experts here in the room, and I encourage you to network and learn from your peers throughout today's program. There's also quite a few students here today from around Central Ohio. These students aim to work in environmental careers one day. Please make them feel welcome and say hello. Now, I'd like to let you know about our upcoming EPN events, including a November program about the inaugural Ohio Soil Health Week, which was planned in collaboration with the Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association, also known as OAMHA. For this program, taking place on Tuesday, November 12th, we'll host a panel of farmers and soil scientists and discuss the importance of the first ever Ohio Soil Health Week, along with soil health strategies and policies. This November EPN program includes a post-breakfast discussion led by Mary Terosy from the Nature Conservancy related to the implications of the November general election for soil health policy. You can register for our November 12th program today by following the details on the screen. I'm also happy to announce that on the evening of Tuesday, December 2nd, EPN will host Oh Deer, collaborative efforts to create and link deer management plans across Central Ohio. Both the November and December programs on soil health and deer management will meet right back here at the 4-H Center and on your YouTube channel. I also invite you to become an official EPN member. Becoming an EPN member is a free and easy process. All you need to do is create an account on our website. Being an EPN member is the best way to stay updated about our upcoming breakfast programs and other events happening in our region. EPN members can also post their own events and job openings for other members to see. Follow the link on the screen to register as an EPN member today, epn.osu.edu. Once you join, your name will be added to our list of over 2,300 EPN members. Check out the list of environmental professionals who have joined EPN membership directory in the last month. The rest of today's events will officially begin right here in about 10 minutes. Please talk to Joe or Harrison if you have any logistical questions. As I mentioned earlier, our extended workshop series begins at 10 a.m. here in the ballroom. Please refer to the agenda in your program brochure and the screen behind me for all of the workshop details. As a reminder, the workshop series begins with Dr. Maryanna Klatt's Mindfulness in Motion course from about 10 to 10:45. Then from 11 to 11:45, Jesse Cassiano will lead a fundraising application workshop. Around noon, we'll break for lunch, and Ellen Eiler's yoga session will begin shortly thereafter. Last, Kimberly Ordonez will lead a workshop on networking for climate resilience from 1 o'clock to 1:45. Several of our SENR folks are participating in Ohio Environmental Education Fund workshop from 9:45 until 1:45 today, which is separate from the workshop series I just described. For the SENR students and staff registered to attend this separate workshop, please join Heather Lauer in the boardroom at 9:45. I have one parting note. While you're making your way out the door or clearing off your table, please help us return the reusable scarlet colored plate and cutlery toolkits with all the pieces accounted for by scraping food off into the compost bin and returning these reusable dining items to the bins located near the exits. If you're unsure on where to place your plates and utensils, no worries, simply leave them on your table and we'll take care of the rest. Thank you again for joining us.